Welcome to Advancing the Diaconate, a series devoted to highlighting the work of deacons and their ministries in the world and the church. Now, here's your host.
And hello again, everyone. I'm John Ray on behalf of Advancing the Diaconate, and I'm here with Deacon Stephen Bentley. Deacon Steve is by day, he's a cartoonist, and we're going to talk to him more about his day work and how that informs his ministry. But we're going to also, of course, talk about his ministry, in this case at St. John the Evangelist Episcopal Church in Stockton, and he is the founder of the Hub, helping Urban Bicyclists, and we'll hear more about that shortly. Deacon Steve, it's an honor to be with you. Thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure to join you, and apologies for the inconvenience of the phone in the background.
No worries. So, Steve, let's give everyone a little bit better introduction to you than I did. Tell them a little bit about you and your journey.
Well, I started my journey probably some 30 years ago, but did not want to admit that deacon work was what I do. I just thought what I did was just do service to people, help people out the best I could. And after doing as many things that I was doing, youth work and fellowship type of things, granting opportunities where we would all gather together, my priest finally said to me, you have all the skills to become a deacon, and what you should do is look into what that means. And at that point I said, no way, there's absolutely nothing that I could do I didn't want to walk around with a collar on me, identifying myself as a person who did work for the church. But it took about a year for me to finally say yes to that and investigate what it was about and go through the process of the diaconate. And for me, it took a couple of years because as you may know, in this diocese, we had a schism that sort of interrupted some time. And I started my process at the time of just before the schism, and then after the schism, we came back, and I invited myself and asked the bishop if I can get back into the process. So all in all, it took about 10 years for me to do the process, 3 of the actual work, and 10 as a pause in between all of that. But in order to do God's work, time is up to God, not up to us.
Amen to that. Steve, talk about your professional career. I want to get a little more into that call and how some of that unfolded, but talk about your professional career.
What I do as a day job, I draw a comic strip for Creator Syndicate, a comic strip called Herb and Jamaal, which is a comic strip that's been in the paper since 1989, so about 33 years. It features 2 characters mainly, Herb and Jamaal, the 2 named characters, and they're best friends who knew each other from high school. And it talks about friendship. It talks about their love of that relationship that they have. There's family involved. There's some pertinent information. Sometimes it's not always a funny cartoon. Sometimes there's some poignancy, and that is the stuff that leads me to doing it when I can actually use words and pictures to even offer commentary that might lend itself to scripture.
I love that. And there's so much of the diaconate in the concept of friendship.
Yes,
right?
Absolutely.
Say more about that.
Well, everything is relational, as you probably know, and as we all know, that everything that we do in the church is how we deal with one another. Like the work that we do at the Hub, it's all relational. It's not about just building a bicycle. It's finding an opportunity to find out what are the needs of the person, and how can we best minister to who they are. And that's kind of the characters of Herb and Jamaal. They are talking to one another, that the way that they talk to each other is the way that you and I are having this conversation now. You're finding out more about me, I'm finding out more about you. That explores where we are as a person. And then, from there, it develops into a greater relationship. And that relationship also calls itself as our relationship to God. How do we relate ourselves to that person, that entity that we call our God in Jesus Christ?
Mm. So, one of the things that strikes me about your ministry there, because that's a ministry, that what you do with Herb and Jamaal is the concept of friendship through thick and thin, because there's thin in your work.
Oh,
right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And as you say that, there's all the characters that I have in Herb and Jamaal, there's tension. It may not always be the best tension. There might be some adversarial conflicts there, but at the end of the day, if you've read the comic strip and you spent enough time with the cartoon, that even the characters that are the most adversarial between each other, the mother or the Herb and his mother-in-law, that's a real contentious relationship. But at the end of the day, these two love each other. And that's what it is. We can love each other through, through the best of times and the worst of times.
I think we can stop right here. I think that's good stuff right there. Yeah, that's terrific, Steve. So let's talk about you talked about this journey you went through in your call, and you said you felt like maybe or your priest said to you, "Hey, I see skills." What did your priest see in you that maybe you didn't necessarily see to begin with?
He saw the leadership. He saw how I worked with people. There's a compassion component that's there, that when you are dealing with people, you have to recognize that you have to take the entire person in. You have to take the entire person as who they are, and not treat them. Everyone is treated with the same respect, with the same kind of love, the same kind of dignity, all the things that we have in our outline of faith. That's scriptural in the book that we have in our Book of Common Prayer, that we are to treat each person like that. And because I was dealing with that, and most of the people that I was working with were kids, catechism was where we started. And that was always rotating in my mind, is what are we teaching our kids? What are we teaching the catechism? All of these things have to be continued to the forefront on how you treat people. And if you're going to work with kids, you got to know that the outline of faith is where it's the basis of who we are. And that is and that's what I think the priest saw in me, is you're teaching the faith and you're teaching it to these kids. You may not be ordained to do this. Well, maybe you are in some ways, but you're not. Your hands have not been laid on by the bishop, but you are preaching and teaching the word that Jesus is talking about, and also what the nature of the faith is. So I think that's what my priest saw. He saw a lot of that, and also I'm very inventive. As we might talk about the hub and a couple of other things that have happened. The creativity that comes with that is, how do we find ways to create ministries that others can either both be involved in, or how do we minister to those people in our community in the most effective way?
Talk about the role of community in discernment, because you're talking about, in this case, a priest that saw something in you that you didn't necessarily see in yourself, in the way that he saw it, and how that might translate into your ability to serve in the way that you eventually were called to. So talk about how community plays out in discerning to be a deacon.
I guess that's a hard, I'm not sure how the question is being posed. How I guess I see it is that I hate to repeat myself, but everything's relational.
Mm.
That how do we, uh, in order to do the work that we have called to do, we have to see the nature of the people that we're working with.
Mm.
We have to know the community. We have to invest ourselves in the community in order to minister to them effectively. And when when we start talking about the hub, I will share how did that begin. But one of the things that I saw that I wanted to do in our parish at one point was, we had a service that had two different hours, a 10 o'clock hour and an 8 o'clock hour. And how do you get these people who are living in the same community, who will go to different services, how are they going to be able to know one another? You might see them out in the community, might go to the market, and you don't even know that the same person goes to your church. So I was looking for ways in which we can create an opportunity where they can all come together. So at one parish, when I was in Los Angeles, I created what was called a breakfast club. And between the services, we would have a breakfast that would invite both 10 o'clock people and the 8 o'clock people to come in and have breakfast together. And that way they would know that these people are part of our community. Mm-hmm. And that's a very inventive way and a very simple way to say, how do we bring the nature of a community together? And that's just one example.
So, Steve, you were ordained a deacon. Somewhere along in there came the hub. So let's talk about the beginnings of that ministry. I mean, when did it start? Did it start before you were ordained, after? Talk about that.
Part of it was one of the things in the School for Deacons was to invite us to come up with an idea of what, if you go back to your community after you finish your education, what would you want to do? And come up with a mission. So we were to look at that, put it on paper, and come up with a concept. Excuse me. And in the midst of that, I thought, well, I've always been a bicyclist. And in my community, I've always bicycled next to the church where I am now. But it was not the church I was assigned. But I would always go there, and there was this building right next door to the church, belonging to the church, but it was being used as a place where the NA group, the Narcotics Anonymous group, would meet, and they would meet 1-2 times a week. And I thought to myself, if I had that space, and it's a large space, it's a commercial space. Say, what would you do with that space? And I said, well, it was right here in the downtown community. Why don't we come up with something where bicyclists can ride into the town? This is the concept before the hub, but it was very similar to it. If people wanted to ride their bike into downtown area and have a safe place to park their bike, where would they do it? They could park it here, and we can provide showers, and we can provide lockers, and people are working in the downtown area, and they could use this space as a space where they can ride into town, and it'd be a commuter location for people who ride in. Well, that was how it began, but simultaneously I was working at a bicycle shop, and there at the bicycle shop we would always have people coming in needing repairs for their bicycle. And there was a fellow that came in one day, and he was handicapped. He had a handicapped arm, and in order to change the inner tube on a bicycle, it would cost you about $15 to do that. $5 for the tube, $10 for the repair. And this kid did not have the $15 to do that. He had the $5 for the tube, and he asked for the work. And no one there at the business, because it's retail, they want to make money, told the kid that they would provide him with the tools to do it. He could do it himself on the side, but we can't do the work and without pay. And I took the chance, and I said, this kid has no capability of doing it himself. He's handicapped. Let's take care of him. And I helped him. Got in trouble, of course, and my boss said, you can't do that kind of labor. But it gave me the idea that this is one person who needs help and can't afford this work. how can we provide a service where we can help those who cannot afford transportation and the services in order for them to begin to move up the level of success for themselves. If they don't have transportation, they can't get to work, they can't get to the doctor's office, to school, whatever their need is. And that became the concept, the beginning of the hub.
Wow. So you went through the school, you graduated, you were ordained, and then how did the ministry start to gel? How did it get off the ground?
Well, I had a lot of resistance in the beginning, and that's always, I think, in mission work, it's probably always hardest to give those people a power that you have an idea and they should invest themselves in it. So with the resistance I was receiving from the people in our parish, they said, well, first of all, we don't want to deal with the homeless. We don't want to deal with these people down here. The best way to take care of them is to just throw money at whatever organization, philanthropic or charity company, and give the money to them. Let them take care of it. We can't do it ourselves. And I thought, well, that's not how we should be as a Christian organization. If we are living the gospel, we need to live the gospel fully. And it was one day that I remember we were doing a noonday service at the church, and we were talking, it was about Jesus opening the gates and doors and allowing people to come in, people who are poor. How do you take care of the sick and so forth? And I turned to the priest there and recognized that what is happening currently is counter to the idea of what Scripture is telling us to do. We should be open the doors. We should be inviting these people in. We should find all kinds of ways to allow them to be a participant in the community. And I said to the person, to the priest, I said, if I can't be a part of this congregation if I am not living out the gospel message, if I am hypocritical to this, then I need to be someplace where I'm actually doing the work, because I have been charged as an ordained person, being charged by taking vows of caring for those people who are sick and those who are uncared for. And I said to them, we're going to begin to do this. And I came up with the idea of the bicycle shop and the hub and so forth, as I mentioned. And finally, I had to talk to the bishop, who coincidentally is a bicycle rider, and he thought the idea was a good concept. And talking to the bishop, he says, just go ahead and do it. Do the work, and don't worry about the people. I'll talk to them, and we'll let the concept emerge. And that's pretty much how it began. And we started with literally absolutely nothing but the space. I invited the people who were using the building, the AA people, to use a different portion of the building, so that we can have that space available and use that office storefront. And I started with literally nothing but stuff that I found from one place or another. Beg, borrow, and steal, as they say, and that's kind of what we did. It's just whatever we can find. We began to ask for help and created the place that we have now.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that, because I know one of the things I've read is that in your ministry, all your parts, the bikes themselves, tools, everything is donated. So how did you, from that initial resistance, how did you rally support around this ministry?
A couple of ways. One was anyone who had a bicycle that I knew had a bicycle, first I would tell them, if you got a bike that's being stored in your garage that you're no longer using, give it to me. I'll refurbish it, put it back together, and we'll do what we can. And as I said, I was working for a bicycle company at the time, and we're doing bicycle repairs. And one of the places, REI was about to close its business in our area. And I'd already established a great relationship with them, and I said to them, if you would allow me to take some of the older equipment, you're moving the shop itself. So all of this equipment you're either going to give to another store or get rid of. Give me the stuff that you're no longer using, and I can create the bicycle shop that I have. And they give me some great equipment, about $10,000 worth of bicycle equipment and tools and product wear and things like that. And that became part of it. And then I created another relationship with the other bicycle shop that was in town. And again, they defunct and gave me their product. And there's still one more bicycle a shop in town that I'm working with now. And when people come in to give them bikes, if they're buying a new bike and getting rid of an old one, they'll give me the bicycle and I'll get that way. And word of mouth begins to happen after a while. People really want to invest in what we're doing. It took a while for a lot of people to give trust in what we were doing. They just thought, who's this guy that's giving bicycles away? Right. Literally giving bicycles away to people and not asking anything in return. And people would just donate money to us, and that would create the funds for us to buy the things that we needed to buy. But many of the old bicycles, they had parts, and I just either took parts away and created another bike, which we called Franken biking. And so
I love it. Well, talk about the community reaction. I mean, what was going on in the community, and how did they react? I can see there might be some businesses that didn't much care for what you were doing, possibly. Yeah. But I could see some others in the community that would have endorsed immediately what you were up to.
The downtown Stockton community is kind of unique in that there's a lot of businesses there. We're located right in the area where the city government is established. So they kind of look at you with a little dubious idea of what are you trying to do there. One of my neighbors owns she rents a building from us, the next space next door to the hub, and it's a tax office. And I wanted to, and she, before, as I mentioned before, we had the schism, we lost our building, we had to sue to get it back. And in the time that the other selection of church was there, they did not have a good relationship with the community. And we had to sort of start from scratch to get ourselves some credibility. So I was asking her if I can use her the connection of internet that I had from her. I can see that there was power coming from her building, and I said, "Can I get your password?" And there was such a huge resistance to that, and it was kind of contentious between she and I. And I'm wearing my collar, and I walk in, and she says, "Well, you own the building, so you can do whatever you darn well please." I said, "Well, I just want to borrow your internet." Well, that relationship was not very good in its beginning, but over this 8-year period of time that I've been doing the hub now, she's become my best friend. But because she finally saw what it was that we're trying to do in the community. And that's very true with much of the other people that we've had to deal with. A bank that's further down the street, there's a couple of banks in the area, and people would just walk by and see us and see this rinky-dink little shop trying to emerge, and people are walking to the shop to have bicycle repairs. And most of the people that we're dealing with are folks who are homeless or just underemployed, and they need the assistance. And they were wondering, why are all these people who don't look like they need to be in this community coming to this place that was offering these services? So it was a bit of resistance in the beginning.
How did you keep the faith during this time? And you had some difficulties as it went along. I mean, you've grown significantly, but you had difficulties along the way. And talk about how you kept the faith, Steve.
Well, I guess I have to admit that some of it is just intestinal fortitude. It's realizing that nobody else is doing this. And here's, I think the thing that seems to be the key to me is when you begin to see the successes that are happening with one person, even if it's just one person sure can make the difference. Uh, in building a bike for someone and having them go away, and then a week or 2 weeks later saying, I got a job, just got my first apartment, I just got a paycheck, I want to give you a couple of dollars toward that. And they're showing their appreciation for the work that you're doing. And that gives you, well, if I can help one person, I can help the next person. Next person might come up and they're riding a bike, and then they come back and they're driving a car. And say, I brought this car because you gave me the bicycle that gave me the impetus to move to the next level. So a lot of it is just seeing the many successes that happen. And it doesn't have to be huge. It could just be that, oh my gosh, you don't know how much it meant for you to put an inner tube in my bike that I couldn't afford, or to put a chain back together, or the smallest thing to make the bike continue to move, because that bicycle becomes the most important thing that motivates them to that next thing. Transportation is key. I mean, if you didn't have a car, how would you get around? This is their car,
right?
And this is the mode of transportation that gets them to where they have to go.
Yeah, that's terrific. Talk about your ministry in the pandemic. I mean, how did the pandemic affect your ministry, either for the good or for ill?
We have flourished in a multitude of ways. The pandemic is we had to pause. The bicycle part did not stop. I continued. I just had to make some changes in how we were connecting, and give social space so we can do the work. Put the bike here, obviously the bike, and bring it in, and just stay where you are. So those kinds of things were necessary for us to do. But we realized in some of the partnerships that we were having in the community that there were still needs in the community. We extended ourselves where we were working with our downtown partners to have a shower and bathroom for those people who are living on the street, because they had no way of washing and keeping themselves clean. We connected with the health department, and they provided the vaccines, and we did vaccines outdoors for those who were living on the street. We made a partnership with a mobile laundry service, where they would drive their vehicle onto our property and wash clothes. So we, rather than distance ourselves from people, we actually brought them in a little closer, so that we can take care of their needs that were not being met. And we've been extremely fortunate that we haven't received many people who were getting sick. We're helping people remain healthy.
Wow. I read somewhere where there are often more clients at the hub than there are attendees in your church. Did I read that correctly?
That's very correct. In our parish, we may have as many as 20, 25 people, sometimes at best about 30. Special services, of course, will have more. But at the hub, I have typically on a common day about 25 to 30 people having service to their bicycle. So our interaction is different in that we are, and we count each interaction we have, which may be a bicycle, or maybe they may come up and ask for prayer. They might ask for food. We keep provisions of water and food around, so if they need that becomes an interaction. Each one of these is a ministry. You know, each one is an opportunity for ministry, because if we don't ask what their needs are, how are they going to be met? And so we may get on an average week about 100, 150 people coming through, which, I mean, we don't count them as butts in the pew. We count them as interactions. And that's ministry to us. And coincidentally, we even count the dogs, because dogs become as important to these people as their best friend. It is their best friend. It is their comfort animal. It's their comfort. So, and because we're treating them with the same kind of respect as the people, you know, they are a ministry as well.
Yeah. So I saw a quote from you, Steve, and I want to read this so I get it right. It said, you said, what we see in this community, we offer to the church for response in prayer and for action. This, in some regards, is more church than that building.
True. Absolutely. A priest friend of mine gave me a Book of Common Prayer and printed on it. She had printed on the cover, the hub is the church. And that's in essence, that's true, because people are coming there for their spiritual needs, for their own personal needs. And I'm recognized as the deacon, Deacon Steve, and Deacon Steve here is Deacon Steve there. And they even if I'm just walking down the street, I'm associated with the hub, with the church. It's all connected. It's all interconnected. You can't say one without saying the other.
It would be, I think our listeners would love it if maybe you could tell a story or two that really represent a parable of where God shows up at the hub.
Oh my gosh. Where do I begin? There's each day is a parable, I think.
Yeah.
In some way. There I think there's a couple that stick out. Gosh, I'm struggling to trying to pinpoint one. I mentioned the one fellow or a couple of people who received bikes and moved up to the next level. I think those are usually the best responses. I do recall there was some of the folks that we deal with, because of their homelessness, have never felt as though they were invited into a church. So we invite people to come as you are, no matter what you're wearing. If you're a homeless person and all you have is a shirt that you worn for the past 3 weeks, and you may smell like the street, you're still invited to be a part of that. You're still invited to be part of the church, and we will try to provide that love to you. And it's a welcoming environment. There is no, of all the people that we have in our congregation, there is no judgment of the people that are there. There's always a love that's being expressed that is God's love to them. It's an open arms kind of relationship. I'm not sure how we would relate that to a parable. I just think it's just the nature of how we should respond in the ways that God is asking us to respond. It's living out the gospel message each and every day, whether it's inside the church when we're just doing a prayer service. Oh, here's this is just dawning on me a story. So a person came into homeless person came into the church, and I was sitting outside the church, because I typically sit out there and watch people before we have the church, and people are walking by left and right. And I had this conversation with this woman, and having the conversation, we're asking some, what kind of needs do you have? And I stood there and I prayed over her, and says, I have nothing to give to you to offer to the church, but she gave me a pair of socks that she had, and that was the only thing she really had to give us. That's like the 2 pennies of the woman who gives the 2 denarii, and that all she could give me were these socks. And that was the most important thing that she could possibly give me. They were filthy and dirty, but they were matching. And so I took these socks and I washed them, and they fit. And I wore them. And I said, these are more important than any of the socks I've ever had, because these came from a person who had nothing. And we're going to wear these socks to represent that those of the people who have very, very little, who are offering all that they have for the appreciation and love that the church is showing.
Mm. Wow. That's I'm speechless. Yeah, that's powerful, Steve. Thank you for sharing that. So you're a member of AED. Talk about why you're a member, what AED means to you, what it does for you as a deacon.
I think mostly what it tells me that I'm not alone. You know, we do this work, and there are other people that recognize the work that we do. They're deacons also. We're all in this together. When I was in seminary, the thing that meant most to me was the camaraderie and the fellowship that I had with my fellow students, because they did not. If when we were together, we could talk about things that the rest of the community outside of those who were not ordained, even priests for that matter, the deacons know something different than other clergy. They know how to, and they touch people differently. We interact differently than other clergy, and our response to what we do as a community is completely different than how a priest or a layperson may deal with it. And I think that's what AED does for me, is it allows me to have a partnership and a relationship with those who understand the ministry of the diaconate.
Wow. You're an honored AED, and we're, we appreciate you. I appreciate you. And I know all those that hear your story appreciate you and the great, tremendous work that you do, bringing God to the streets on a bicycle, as it were, right?
Absolutely. Yes. Yeah.
That's fantastic. One other thing I heard in your story, Steve, is that here's a parish of 25 hardy souls that can support a thriving ministry.
Oh, yeah.
And that's a powerful, in this age of churches that feel like they can't make a difference because of their numbers. That's a powerful testimony that you've given here.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I like to think that and one of the things that I've been at this parish now for 8 years, and we started very small, very simple. In fact, I like to say that we started with negative 20 people when I began there. We actually were borrowing people from other congregations in order to fill the pews until we can move forward and build our church. So, and we had the building, we had the space, but we were not doing anything. And these people began to sit in the seats. And those who come to us are folks who recognize that we're doing something in the community. I have a couple of college professors that are part of our community who could have gone to a more lucrative parish and been a part of that, but they saw what we were doing and felt compelled that they wanted to be involved in this ministry more than going and warming a seat in a pew. So it's those people that I look to and say, you are the heart and meat of this congregation, because you see what we're doing, and you have the means in which to continue to support it. So I don't look at the money or the stewardship. However, that is always going to be a part of what we look for. We want people to help support us, but we also want those compassionate hearts to be there as well, to recognize the ministry and want to see that ministry flourish.
Compassionate hearts in action. Wow. Doesn't get any better than that. Deacon Stephen Bentley, with the Hub in Stockton, California, and St. John the Evangelist Episcopal Church. This has been such a pleasure chatting with you and an inspiration. And we're grateful to you for you and your work and your ministry and your example. For those that would like to get in touch and maybe learn more, can they do that? And if so, how so?
They can reach me through the church itself. If they want to call, and they can call the Hub. They usually get a response from that. Area code 209-663-9955. My email address is the name of the comic strip, frankly. It's Herb hyphen and hyphen Jamaal, Jamaal at hotmail.com. And they can reach me in those two manners. Or they can find me on Facebook through the Hub, which is 131 Hub, the Hub 131.
Deacon Steve Bentley, it's a pleasure, and thank you again.
Thank you, John. I sure appreciate the invitation to be with you.
Thank you so much. And everyone, I'm John Ray, Deacon John Ray, on behalf of Advancing the Diaconate. It's an initiative that is underwritten by the Fund for the Diaconate and the Association for Episcopal Deacons. If you would like to know more, you can go to episcopaldeacons.org, which is the website for AED. Once again, I'm John Ray for the Advancing the Diaconate. Please join us next time.
Thank you for joining us on Advancing the Diaconate. This series is a joint production of the Association for Episcopal Deacons and the Fund for the Diaconate, who support deacons and their ministries today and tomorrow. Join them and add your support for deacons.